Welcome. My name is Van Richards. I'm a chartered financial consultant, and today we're going to be talking about Intuitive Surgical. So let's get started with the daily stock analysis. Intuitive Surgical is an interesting company. We cover a lot of interesting companies here. The reason why that I'm covering this particular stock today is because of you all, the listeners. I had one of the listeners that wrote in on the platform on YouTube and said, "Hey, could you cover Intuitive Surgical?" And I am really glad to do that. If there is a stock that I've followed before and I've got enough information on it, I will be glad to include it in the program and help you, the listeners, so that I can help you to understand these different stocks. Now, remember, there's three things that I focus on when we're talking about stocks. One's going to be the earnings. We're going to talk about that today. We talk about the competitiveness and we talk about the stability of the stock. Now, Intuitive Surgical, I have a personal interest in Intuitive Surgical, not just from a ownership standpoint of owning the stock, but I was actually the lucky recipient of the use of their surgical equipment. Now, you'll see what I mean here in just a little bit. And just a real short little story. I was actually disabled for 5 years. And I had a surgery that was done with one of the machines that you're going to be seeing today. And it actually gave me the ability to come back to work. So I am excited about covering Intuitive Surgical. And you're going to see what a unique company this is. So let's get right into it today and talk about this company that, even though the market is down, yes, you're going to see that. The market's down, but this stock, it's one of those stocks that you need to look at and you need to think, I want to buy that stock. Or else if you look at it, you go, that is such a unique company that I want to buy that stock. Be prepared when the market goes down to buy into it, because there's not another company like this out there. So let's get started and talk a little bit more about what this company does and what its future may hold and how you might be able to participate in its growth. So let me make the screen just a little bit bigger here so that we can see everything that's going to go on. And before I forget, I do work as a financial planner. And if you need help with your retirement plan and you're in Texas, go over to Richard's Financial Planning and I can help you to create a retirement plan so that you don't run out of money during retirement. I'm excited to talk to you about stocks. So we're going to go ahead and begin into talking about Intuitive Surgical. And I hope that some of you are not too squeamish. A little bit of stuff going on here. So let's see what goes on with this company. Intuitive Surgical is around an $81 billion company. Probably with the market falling today, it's probably closer to $80 billion. I always find that interesting how much big dollars can move when the market goes down or up in just a period of a day. But let's say right around $80 billion. It's a huge, huge, huge company. It was down today by about 4.59%. The average stock today, let's say if we're looking at the NASDAQ and the Dow Jones and all the other major indices, they were down in between 3 and 4%. And friends, I don't think that we're completely done right now with this market drawback. I think that we're going to be seeing a correction territory that might be as much as 10% off of the highs that we saw back just about a month ago. Let me show you exactly what I mean. And I think that you'll understand. We went through this a little bit yesterday. Now, in the graph that you see, the spaghetti graph, this is actually a chart that's showing I charted Intuitive Surgical along with the S&P 500. And if you look at the peak right here, this was September the 2nd. And the S&P 500 was at 3580.84 on that day. Now, when you come on over and you look at actually what the market ended at today, the S&P was down at 3,390.68. So that's down 5.31%. Now, this is just my opinion, but I really think that we're probably in store for as much as a 10% 10% drawback all the way off of the highs that we had from September 2nd. Now, what's that doing to the price of the stock? If you go back to September the 2nd, you can see that Intuitive Surgical was selling at that point in time for $765.11. It ended today at 687.8. That's down about 10% off of its highs on September the 2nd. Now, when I talk about a 10% correction in the market, that's just the general S&P 500. We have to also consider that you'll have stocks like Intuitive Surgical that are probably going to draw back even more. You could probably see down as much as 5% more off of that high of 765.11 that was in September 2nd. But there's no guarantees on that, but that's just kind of the way that I look at it. When we look at the earnings call that occurred back in October, it was October 16th, things have actually gotten better at Intuitive Surgical. A lot of the procedures that these machines are used for are voluntary procedures. And those procedures, as you probably well know, a lot of them were put off because of the pandemic. That's actually reversed to some degree, and we've seen actually an increase in elective surgeries. We saw procedures in the United States up about 7% for the third quarter. Outside the United States, it was up about 9%. Now, when we focus on earnings, remember, there's three things we look at, friends, when we look at a stock. We look at the earnings, the competitiveness, and the stability of the stocks. The earnings, yes, they were down for the second quarter of 2020. Remember, there was a pandemic that started back then, but it's actually recovered quite nicely as far as the value goes. Let's hope that everything else in the world does too. Volumes are up very well from their depressed levels of the second quarter. If you look at the chart that's in front of you, you can actually see that with the net income. If we look at the net income from, let's say, the third quarter of this year, that was at about $313.9 million. Yes, it's down compared to the $396.8 million from a year ago, the third quarter. But think of it this way. If we go back to the second quarter, it was only at 68 million. So it's actually increased significantly. So that's really, really good news. When we look at the price of this particular stock over a period of a year, it's had a decent year. It's not a Tesla year. There's no other company like a Tesla year. And if you want to know what I mean by that, go back and look at my Tesla video that I made a few days ago, and you'll see the hundreds of percent of increase. But back on this stock, it was at 558.65 a year ago. Again, it ended today at 687.80. So that's about a 23.12% increase. Now, let's turn back the clock a little bit more, because I think that's really helpful when we're looking at a stock. Because when I talk to you about stocks, I'm talking to you about stocks that are going to be for the long term. Now, remember that when we look at stocks over the long term, we look at it from the standpoint of cycles. What I mean by that is a market cycle is generally going to be 4 to 5 years. And the reason I say that is the average bear market's going to last around 18 months. And the average bull market is going to last 4 to 5 years. When you add those together, you're going to have a market cycle of about 4 to 5 years. So we go back, we're going to look really at the graph that you have in front of you is going to be a 5-year time period. And if we look at the price of Intuitive Surgical a year ago, we can see, excuse me, not a year ago, 5 years ago, we see that it was at 165.53, and it has increased up to where we know it as now at 687. That's a whopping 315% increase over 5 years. If you calculate that out with your little financial calculator, as I did, you see that the annual percentage rate increase on this is 32.96%. Now, look, notice the red letters there. The past performance is not a guarantee of the future performance. You have to understand that. With stocks, we can have good years and bad years. We're hoping that we string together more good years than bad years so that we make a profit. Now, when we compare this, remember when we talk about stocks, we talk about those three things that I always go over every day. We talk about the earnings, the competitiveness, and the stability. So if we're looking at the competitiveness, who competes right now with Intuitive Surgical? Johnson & Johnson does, but Johnson & Johnson has other different things. They're even into the drug manufacturing concept. They're actually one of the companies that's doing testing with a coronavirus drug that's going to be a one-time drug. That'll be a great thing rather than the two-dose drug. You also look at companies like NuVasive and Boston Scientific. These are the companies that compete with Intuitive. And you have to also look at it from the standpoint that there's no company that does exactly what Intuitive does. NuVasive is probably the closest. There are some lower cost procedures that they're creating devices that can compete with, but there's no company out there that's actually competing with Intuitive Surgical. Now, remember, when we look at the moat, what's a moat? Why do I have this picture up here? A moat is going to be that imaginary barrier that is between the company and between its competition. And really, one of the big things right now with Intuitive Surgical is they have basically monopoly status in their niche. There's not another company out there that's making anything like the Da Vinci system. And they also have the new system for lung biopsies that's called Ion. So there's not really another company that's doing anything out there. The thing that, look, the surgeons could go back to doing manual surgery. They don't want to do that for a couple of reasons. One is they can't make as much money doing it. And I want the surgeons to make as much money as they can, within reason, of course, healthcare, all that kind of good stuff. But the point is going to be, it takes a lot more time for them to do surgeries manually than it does by using something like Ion or the Da Vinci system. So that's probably not as much of a pressure, let's say, from the standpoint. Another thing is the competitive pressures of other companies. They are increasing to some degree, and the margins are getting less because when a hospital replaces a system, they're waiting a long time. We'll look at that when we talk about what the bears are saying about this stock. But let's look at actually what some of the bulls. Now, when I say bulls and bears, what I'm talking about is comments from the analysts who cover this particular stock. Those who are bullish on it right now are saying that one of the benefits to the Da Vinci system is it can be used for all kinds of things. It can be used for gynecological treatment. It can be used for something like that I had for the hernia surgeries. It can be used for prostate surgeries. It's used for a multitude of different procedures. So it covers a lot of bases. When we look at ongoing service, these are machines. They break sometimes and they have to be serviced. They also have to be replaced from time to time. And there are absolutely no direct rivals. When we look at the bearish aspects of this and what some of those who are bearish on this particular stock say, there are some lower cost procedures, like I mentioned, NuVasive a minute ago, that may be coming out with other different types of devices that will be competitive, but that's still going into the future. Replacement is slow. There's a lot of hospitals that are under pressure right now because of the pandemic on a worldwide basis to get as much out of the equipment that they have, and they're going to be a little bit slower to replace the older equipment. Another bearish aspect is that some of the procedure uses are slowing down. Now, what I mean by that is that there were some procedures like gynecological procedures, surgeries that were really being overused to some degree in the past. And what we're seeing is those procedures are slowing down in usage. So that could cut into some of the profits. Now, what's Morningstar say on this stock? With a current price of 687.80, we're looking at the current valuation, the valuation of about $443 per share. They're saying that this stock is trading at a big premium of about 55.26%. If we had the PE ratio, we would see that the PE ratio is really high on this one too. If memory serves me correct, it's actually somewhere in between 70 and 80. So that's pretty high considering that the PE ratio of the average stock in the S&P 500 right now is around 30. That's pretty high. It's really just a one-star stock. Now, that doesn't mean it's bad. Don't take it in that context. When you look at the star system from Morningstar with stocks, it's different. It's different than that of mutual funds. So let's look now and see what the analysts on average are saying. When we average out all the analysts that are covering this particular stock, there's about 15 different analysts that are covering Intuitive Surgical, and you're finding out that 7 of them are saying that it's a strong buy. 2 of them are actually saying that it's going to be a sell. So they're saying that it's going to be a moderate buy. Now let's pick this apart just a little bit. And let's look more at what some of these different analysts are saying and the price ranges, because you know that it's going right now for about that 680 price from the standpoint of today's close. What are they saying that is a fair price on this? So if you follow over here, you can see that, okay, let's pick one. Let's say JP Morgan Chase says that they are overweighting in this particular stock. And they're pegging the price in between 765 and 785. So that's really pretty far off of what it is right now. So I think that we've got a lot of room to grow with this particular stock. That's a good thing as we go by. Now, remember though, folks, that if you need individual help and you're living in Texas, go over to my website, originfinancialplanning.com, and I will be glad to take some time and talk to you about your individual issue. I'll give you about 20 minutes free on the phone, and we can talk about whatever you'd like. But let me go back to you, everybody else that's out there. If you have a particular stock that you're interested in, put it into the platform, whatever you're following, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Twitter. Let me know what you think, and I will be glad to do some research and help you out a little bit. Now, I'm not going to give you direct advice. I can't do that because I don't know you, but I can help you and do the research that you were seeing today, the type of research you were seeing today, so that you can make your own decisions on the stocks that you have. Now, I tell people this, that when you're thinking of stocks for the future, there's really only 3 reasons to own stocks. One's going to be the growth. That's going to be something going on for growth in the future. You're trying to grow money for the future. 2 is going to be diversification of assets. You can't just buy all gold. You can't have all in cash. It's good to have some diversification. Now, it's kind of funny. I was listening to Kevin O'Leary yesterday on a podcast, and he was talking about a particular stock that's really, really aggressive. And even he said that he's talking to his children about the fact that you just can't buy one particular stock and expect to make a fortune off of it. You have to diversify. And my philosophy is, if you have about 25 particular stocks that you like, make yourself a list of 25 stocks that you like and pick the stocks that you like and buy them when they're low. Now might be a good time to consider that, because we're probably going to see a few lows in the next couple of days leading up to the election, maybe a little bit even afterwards. Real quickly, the other 2 reasons for buying stocks, we talked about 2 of them. The third one is going to be dividends. This is not a dividend paying stock, but we've covered those in days past. So with that said, I want to say to you, thank you for listening to me today. Remember, again, enter into the platform if you like a particular stock, and I can find the information on it. I can't do it for all of them. Just ask me and I'll be glad to do what I can. So with that said, I'm going to say thank you, everybody, for listening to me today, and come back tomorrow. Have a good evening.